Hi, and welcome to another episode of Toxic Mold Sucks, Malachi's Message podcast. I'm Elizabeth Kripe. I'm the executive director and co-founder of Malachi's Message. Co-hosting today is Emily Rochelle. She is the board chair and co-founder of Malachi's Message. We get to interview Mary. She is, after struggling with years of chronic illness due in large part to mold exposure, which led to CIRS, heavy metal toxicity, and Lyme disease, Mary Cornwell dove into healing her body, mind, and soul using a natural holistic approach. 2 years later, she was still very much feeling stuck and sick. So she studied building biology through the Building Biology Institute and also started practicing using principles of regenerative nutrition and detoxification, now feeling more vibrant in her health, which is very noticeable, by the way. When you engage, the few times you've engaged with each other, it's very noticeable that your health is very vibrant. She's passionate about helping clients find root causes to disease, elevate their nutrition, create healthy living spaces, and tap into their potential for vibrant health. But yeah, vibrant health is beautiful. It's a great way of phrasing up who you are from what I've known. So thank you for joining us and being willing to kind of share your journey with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for your kind words and for that introduction. And it's so good to finally connect because it has been a lot of back and forth. So I'm really grateful to be here.
So the first time we talked, you kind of walked me through your mold journey. Would you mind just sharing with people before we dive into your healing process, what your mold journey really looked like?
Yeah. So, perspective is everything, right? And so I can look back and I can give you like a specific time and a year that my health really went downhill. But if I reverse all the way back to even when I was a kid, I got sick a lot in school, and a lot of times the answer was antibiotics or just different medications. And so I was the kid who left school early a lot and just had bronchitis and a lot of different like health, like ear infections and things when I was little, but it never really affected my ability to play sports or be active in life and like have good grades and do the things that a kid wants to do. Right. But in 2014, I actually moved. 2014, 2015, I was living in South Carolina. So really humid, more tropical climate. And I did notice some hormonal shifts and just some things start to happen in my body. And it was also a really stressful time. I was in grad school, and we had a 1,000-year flood during that time while we were in South Carolina. So a lot of the buildings, a lot of the places that I probably frequented, I was actually even part of the flood cleanup crew going into buildings to help volunteer and help try to mitigate those effects of the flood. So there's little instances like that in my life where I can look back and be like, wow, that was probably a really massive exposure. But it wasn't until 2016 where I had moved back to Michigan from grad school and had just started what I thought was my dream job at the health department. I was running like 20 to 30 miles a week. I was training for the Detroit Free Press half marathon. And I moved into this fixer-upper home in the suburbs of Detroit. And it was beautiful from the inside, like had just been recently renovated. But I now know that that means there was a lot of new paint and new floors and new like everything. And not only that, but they had covered up massive amounts of water damage and actually electrical rewiring because the house had been a grow house. And so not only was the basement like flooded from floor to ceiling at one point in time, it also was then being used as a marijuana grow house. And so I actually lived in that house for 2.5 years. When I first moved in, like I said, I was training for that race, and I ended up dropping out of training for the half marathon because about 2 weeks of living there, I started getting a lot of muscle weakness and sciatica through my, from my hip down my leg, and just a lot of muscle weakness. And I just chalked it up to overtraining. I actually just got engaged in that time period as well. And so I also chalked it up to stress, but then it became harder to ignore as symptoms started piling on top of each other. And I just became like a shell of a human being, going doctor to doctor and just getting different diagnoses. So that prompted me, after years of going to different doctors and getting different diagnoses and having neurological issues and insomnia and anxiety and like all of these things that just didn't make sense to me. I was miserable. I finally found a doctor who told me to look at mold in my house and my body. And I remember like the day I got those results back, I just bawled. I literally left work and I went and sat in my car for like an hour because it was like this. And I cried because I knew that was the answer. It was like this big light bulb moment, but then it was also so overwhelming because then I was like, now what the heck do I do? This is going to shift like everything for me. And it really did. And so from that point on, it's been a journey of healing my body and like bringing myself back to balance and embracing like a new sort of normal.
When you said the symptoms kind of, you felt like you were a shell of a person, what symptoms after that 2-week initial start period, what symptoms ended up building up to the point of you getting tested?
Well, so, I mean, it started off as like skin issues. So I remember getting like a lot of eczema and a lot of like painful irritation on my eyelids and a lot of bumps and like boils on my head. So I was given like steroid cream for that, which I took on my eyelids, but I didn't take the actual steroids because I knew it wasn't the solution. And then from there, just things piled on top. Like I got bronchitis over the winter. I got actually really pretty nasty bout of the stomach flu, like 6 months into moving into the house. And that the stomach flu is really, I think, what prompted my body into this like overdrive response, because it was at that moment that my immune system just like caved. And I had my first panic attack ever that week. I never was an anxious person, but I had a panic attack and I couldn't eat solid foods for a week after that. And then that began like this awful like anxiety and OCD and this inability to be able to sleep more than like 45 minutes at night at a time. I was waking up to pee. Like I remember some nights, it sounds crazy, but I remember like sleeping on the bathroom floor because I was like, I have to go to the bathroom like every hour or two. So I remember the time I went to go do the mold test, the mycotoxin test, I ended up just like literally sleeping next to the bathroom on the floor because I wasn't sleeping, and it was better than like going up and down the stairs, which I didn't have the energy to do. So it was really intense. And I think because the mental, like emotional symptoms were so on high alert that I didn't realize also like physically how much it was affecting my body. I did, but I didn't. Yeah.
Wow. I hate that so many times we've talked to people and, you say, oh, I got sick from mold, right? And people say that, and a lot of times it's misunderstood. And it's the assumption like, oh, it's like the flu, like, you'll get over it. Like it's just going to impact 1 week of your life or 2 weeks of your life. Not, you're literally talking about it affecting every facet of your life. You couldn't run anymore. You were sleeping on the ground in the bathroom. Did it affect you don't have to answer this and we can edit it out because we didn't talk about it in our questions, but did it impact your relationships with the people around you at all as you started to go through this journey?
Well, when this first started, before the symptoms became like really not manageable, in between like September to December, I got engaged to someone that I had been dating for a long time. And we lived together in this same house, and he watched me over the course of that 2.5 years, like my health really deteriorate and me become a really anxious person. And he was really supportive in the beginning and like in the way that he knew how to, but it wasn't something that he really completely understood. And so it felt really isolating. And so we ended up getting married during that time. I wasn't really in the state to get married because I didn't feel great. But at that point we had already committed to that. And when we found out that it was mold in our house, he went into this denial mode, and didn't want to believe it was the house. And I was labeled as crazy. And he actually ended up filing for a divorce while I was on medical leave, shortly after we found out that it was mold in our house. So it was like, I don't think a lot of people understand the complexity that mold can have, especially if one person is really, really sick and the other person, he experienced symptoms and he was prescribed statins and actually because he was having high blood pressure and heart issues, but he wasn't willing to look into a holistic way to treat that. And so it did affect him, it just not as dramatically as me.
I wish I could say that's the first time we've heard that, right? Like, I hate that mold we have friends too that we're at the point of like cohabitating for their children's sake. And because of the mold, like, it changed our relationship entirely. So many people we know got divorced. Like, I wish you were not the only person that we have heard that from. It's horrible. Like, it is horrible. The stress it puts on your body and on your marriage is, yeah, that's a whole nother podcast in and of itself. But I'm sorry that happened to you that way. I'm really glad that you've been able to heal, but I'm sorry it came at such a big price for you.
Thanks.
That's a big price.
It has been a big journey. And then, I have along the way found people who have been supportive. And I think that's been a really important piece. Something that was really healing is I ended up moving to Arizona and I found other friends and I found a community of people that I work with now. And also just like along the way who have been able to understand. And even if they don't completely understand, they've been able to be supportive. And so I think that's really important, that community piece, when you're trying to heal from chronic illness.
Mary, was there some sort of magic pill, or how was your recovering process? Like, what did you do?
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. So don't think there's a magic bullet to anything. For me and for really healing from mold toxicity or any chronic illness, it takes a big holistic perspective. But if there's someone out there watching this that has had a magic bullet, I would love to meet you. I really do wish that my journey had been easier, but I feel like I've learned a lot from the experience. So finding a safe place to live was the biggest challenge for me. And I'm sure a lot of people watching this. And then I tried a lot of different supplements and detox protocols, went to a lot of naturopathic doctors. And what really helped me the most, and everyone's body is different, but what really helped me the most is following an alkaline diet and like peeling back the layers, using food as medicine, and taking more of a regenerative health approach. So for me, I follow a protocol that uses superfoods and really nutrient-dense soil that's grown in a farm in Utah that uses regenerative farming practices. And that for me has given me my life force and vitality back. And so using those foods along with just having a support of a community of people going through similar issues has really helped. And then other things like infrared sauna, moving my body, getting my lymphatic system and drainage pathways open. Those are all things that have really helped. So I don't think there's any one thing, but what you do put in your body, I don't know if I should keep it. What you do put in your body every single day is a really powerful choice. And I love the quote of it's either the strongest form of medicine or the slowest form of poison.
Oh, I love that. When you said regenerative, like soil, you talked about regenerative food, like there's a farm you use. For people that are hearing this and going, what does regenerative mean in this context? Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So regenerative, by regenerative, I mean, there's regenerative farming and biodynamic farming. And so less than 1% of soils in the United States have the nutrient density that we used to have. Hi, buddy. The nutrient density and quality that we used to have, say like 20, 30 years ago. Our farming practices use a lot of monocrops. And the nutrient density just isn't there in the foods. And if the soil isn't healthy, then the food that the soil is being grown in doesn't have that nutrient density, and therefore that we're not getting that in our bodies when we consume it. So I work with a superfood company that has a farm in Utah that uses those regenerative farming practices. And those superfoods are wind and solar dehydrated. So I have those every day. I'm nourishing my body. It's part of a bigger protocol that I've used to really nourish and gently detox and heal my gut from the inside out. There's a couple other components to the protocol, like Biomedic, which helps pull out glyphosate from the body, as well as like mold and heavy metals and toxins. But that's been an approach that is the thing that really helped me move a corner and reducing my sensitivities, and helped me get off thyroid meds, and really helped just stabilize my body and give me the foundational support so that other therapies and treatments that I was doing could actually work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's so interesting you talk about soil with that. We, in the past, by the time this is aired, in a past interview, we interviewed Leah Seghetti of Momivation, and she talked a lot about PFAS and the forever chemicals that are in soils and that have been there for decades and decades and decades. And even like a lot of the organic farms that she tested, they came back with really showing not being helpful for your body because of the soil that everything was grown in. So I think it's so interesting that you're going back to like the very basics of, okay, really what is going into your body from the beginning? Let's look at this. I think that's incredible.
Yeah,
I wish more people would
totally.
look at that.
It's like this, so the soil has a microbiome, just like we have a microbiome, and it like actually almost mirrors that. Dr. Zach Bush is someone that I really like his resources around soil health. If you haven't heard about him, I would go check his information out, but he talks a lot about soil health and how it's related to our gut health. And before we start to like focus on this idea of detox, like what I was doing before was taking a lot of like isolate supplements and just a lot of like things to push things out of my body, but really just providing that foundational nutrient support, and allowing my body to like breathe has been key. And it goes back to like taking that holistic approach and being diligent about like, are you eating organic food? And then even going beyond organic, like what's the quality of the food that you're putting in your body?
Yeah, my youngest daughter is chemically sensitive, like, but to the point where you're talking about food, and I've had to learn more about it. I've actually never read that book on soil, and I want to now, as you're talking about it, because she even cannot have fruit from certain states like California because of the soil and because of what they spray on it. If she does, her entire face and body breaks out in a rash. She has stomach aches and fevers, and it blows my mind, first, that we're allowed to eat that, but second, that it can have that much of a reaction on your body. And so I hear what you're saying, and I'm going, man, that just seems logical to me. Like, if you're trying to heal your body, make sure you're setting a platform first so that it can heal. And as you take stuff out, you already have nutrients there to like make sure it's okay. I think it's incredible.
Yeah. And the thing with like organic farms too, is you could have an organic farm that's right next to someone that's spraying Roundup, Monsanto, like right next door. Yeah. And it's being carried over. So the company that I partner with is organic, but they make sure that it's 3 generations organic, and that all of the soil is coming from, right, it's like this dried up lake bed. So it's you've got the mountains surrounding it, and you have the everything that was decomposing from like the fish and the algae and the plants. And so it's like there's that density, but then it's also 250 miles away from any sort of civilization. So that's really important. And like, where are our farms, and who's spraying next door to it, and what kind of crops are being grown there? That the concept of like biodynamic farming is really, really cool, because both biodynamic, regenerative health, and like permaculture, they all use this concept of the farm and the land as like an ecosystem. And like, how are we in harmony with the animals and the plants and like the planets, and all of that coming together to grow our food and the nutrients that we put in our body. Getting off on a little tangent here, but for me, it's been like hugely eye-opening, and is the thing that really, that connection, when we have a connection to our food that we're eating and we're knowing where it's coming from, is huge. That's really healing in itself.
And the taste is so much different when you actually have like real organic food that's grown versus no chemicals. My mom and my stepdad, they had huge gardens. They live in a small town. And I mean, their vegetables were just amazing compared to what you buy at the grocery store. Complete difference in taste.
Yeah, totally. There's I actually found some biodynamic blueberries at Whole Foods a couple months ago, and they were hands down the best blueberries I've ever tasted in my life. They were just so juicy and so, yeah, just so like plump. And something that I learned when I was working, I worked on a biodynamic farm a couple days a week earlier this year. And one thing that I learned, which relates to mold, which is why I'm sharing this, is there's certain days to plant fruits and vegetables. And so there's fire, earth, wind, and what's the other, air days. And so fire days are a really good time to plant fruits in particular. And say they're grown on like a water day, that might be when you're getting fruits that have a lot of mold or like a lot of moisture content is when they're grown on a water day. It's a lot better if they're grown and like planted and harvested on a fire day, because that is when you'll find that they're more like juicier and plump. Not to say that things can't grow, but there's this whole cycle and this whole calendar that we used to follow and we don't follow in farming anymore.
So you said that you went to the farm, right? You worked on it for a few days. And I know in the part of your journey too is you are big on that. You're big on research and education. How has that played into your journey? You went to study building sciences, correct?
Mm-hmm.
As part of your journey. Why did you pursue that?
Yeah, because I realized that no matter what kind of supplements or what kind of food or what you're doing, if you're living in a sick environment, there's everything else you're doing is great that you're supporting your body, but it's not going to get you better. And then I started realizing, like, as I was moving and through this mold process of having to move to multiple different places, like, for example, a new build home, I thought wouldn't have mold, but then I really quickly realized that I was chemically sensitive from the mold. This was like the first place I moved into upon moving to Arizona. And I realized how toxic the paints and the housing materials that were being made really are. And like how, for myself, I eventually want to build a rammed earth home. Like that's my dream home. And in order for me to do that, I need to learn what kind of building materials and what kind of things go into making a home beautiful, but also healthy. And I want to be able to provide that for other people. So I started studying with the Building Biology Institute, which they have a lot of great free resources on there as well as courses. And so that has been like an integral piece of like the building health, and then also the nutrition, and just trying to merge those two together to heal my own self. But then I made a promise that if I was able to heal my body and like my body could start to heal and I could feel more like myself again, that I would be able to help other people on the other side. And so learning it for myself so that I can then share and give that knowledge and like bring greater healing to more people.
Today, we're going to thank our corporate sponsor. We could not do what we do without our corporate sponsors. One of our tier 1 sponsors is Texas Mold Inspectors. Texas Mold Inspectors is a true unbiased third-party state licensed mold assessment company. They do standard and expert litigation-based assessments. They have served attorneys all across Texas. They also have a strict no referral policy. They do this in order to give their clients the peace of mind in knowing that they are there for them and not trying to upsell them by referring them to someone that pays to refer them business. It happens in this industry, which can create a conflict of interest and dishonesty about the true condition in your home or workplace. If Texas Mold Inspectors can say you have mold, then you know that they are being honest, as there's no monetary gain for them. They also currently work at a national level and fly out of state to do assessments. If you'd like to learn more, please contact texasmoldinspectors.com. So what does your life look like now? You're a few years out, right? Like you're a bit out, you've done a lot of research, a lot of education, and you're putting in the time and energy into healing your body. And what does life look like now for you?
Yeah, so I'm in Arizona. I'm in Sedona at the moment, and I go back and forth between Arizona and Sedona. And really, I've been able to be back in my life more. So I'm I've been traveling a lot recently. Just took a road trip around, which is exciting for me because it's not something that I would have been able to do like a year and a half ago, even. So I'm back here and I'm hiking and enjoying Sedona. And then also I see clients around environmental health. So helping people to assess their homes and refer out to different inspection and remediation companies, and just helping people be that person that I wish I had when I first started out with mold toxicity, and when everything felt overwhelming and I didn't know what to do with my belongings and like how to get my health back on track. And I work with a lot of people using the regenerative nutrition approach that we talked about earlier, and just helping people feel better in their bodies using that protocol, but also delving deeper and figuring out what people are really needing to help their bodies rejuvenate and come back online.
Mary, I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you vet the inspectors and remediators yourself, or do you have like a list of questions that you give people to ask?
So both, unfortunately, as we know, there's not really that many great mold and inspection companies that really truly understand SIRS and mold toxicity and how to properly do things. But I do have a handful of trusted people in North Carolina, California, and Arizona and Colorado. So there are a handful of people, not in every single state, but they can do virtual consults. And then for people that, maybe there's not someone in their area, like equipping them with knowledge and questions that they can ask and things that they should know about how things should be done in their home. And I'm sure you guys have a lot of really great resources around that as well, especially for people in Texas. But really just empowering people to know questions that they need to ask. And I will try to vet, like if someone asks me, what do you think of this company or this person? I will sometimes make a phone call and see if that's a connection. And if it's not, then I use that as a education moment for them to share a little bit of my story and the importance of maybe doing things differently.
We didn't even talk about that. Did you have your home inspected? We talked
Yeah.
about you leaving your home, but did you
Yeah.
have your home? Okay.
We did. So I did some preliminary home tests. I did an ERMI test, which I wouldn't say the ERMI is like an end all be all, but when I got my ERMI results back, it was like very eye opening to the point where I didn't even want to spend the night in my house that night that I got the results back. But we still had someone come out and did a visual inspection and took some further testing. And it was in that process where we were going to try to remediate, but I didn't feel comfortable given where I was at in my health. I wanted a fresh start, and I didn't feel comfortable moving back into the house knowing the levels of mold and mycotoxins and endotoxins that were there. And my ex-husband wanted to keep the house. So that was like a really big source of strain and contention there. And something that was like, my health comes first. And so to my knowledge, he had a remediation done, but it was in like kind of in those stages where things broke apart in our relationship. So I'm not quite sure what happened to the house.
You just know you left it.
I just know I left it. Yeah. And I know that we had people come out and it was not good news. And yeah.
Yeah. What your SIRS diagnosis, that's something we've become more acutely aware of. I mean, we partner now with Olivia Farbaugh in a SIRS support fund, but was that an easy journey for you to get diagnosed with that?
No, it wasn't. But getting diagnosed with SIRS was the thing that it was just that light bulb aha moment for me. It took me about over 2 years of living in that house to finally come across someone who knew what that was and knew how to test for it.
That's a long time to go.
Yeah, it is.
That. Yeah.
Well, and it's crazy to me because I had seen so many functional medicine doctors and even naturopaths and maybe it's different now because it's 6 years later. But they had done other environmental testing, like chemicals and like the OAT test and just other functional medicine labs, but they had never run like the SIRS lab markers or the Great Plains mycotox test, which are the two things that doctor eventually had me do that tipped off to like, hey, this is the primary issue. So yeah, if, hopefully there's more doctors that are running those kind of tests. And I think with Facebook and podcasts like this, and just like, nonprofits and things like what you're doing and what I'm doing, it's spreading awareness for that so that people don't have to go that long without knowing what's wrong.
Well, I hear a lot from a lot of the people that I talk with that their functional doctors run all these other tests, kind of like what you just mentioned, and not mold. And it's like, then finally at the end, it's, all right, let's check you for mold. I think you have mold. And I just wonder why they don't do that sooner.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Part of it, I think, is their training. So before I decided to start health coaching and running my own business, I was working for this company. I won't say the name, but it's a holistic supplement company, and they are like a dispensary platform. And I was on their medical advisory team. And like part of my job was going to naturopathic schools and chiropractic schools to the students, to like different health fairs and just like coordinating things with the schools. And from what I could see from like curriculum and just like interacting with the students is they weren't really given or equipped with the knowledge around environmental toxicity. It was like one course, unless they're choosing to explore it further on their own and like they have a reason for looking further into it. It wasn't something that was like the primary focus of their curriculum. And like I said, that could have changed. That was I worked there from 2019 to 20. So that was like 2 or 3 years ago now. But yeah, I think part of it is like, it's just like the mainstream conventional medicine, right? Like the way that doctors are trained is like, here's a symptom, here's like a diagnosis and a pill for that diagnosis. It's part of like the systems of like how people are trained and what information they're given.
We obviously, we've talked a lot about this with other people, including Dr. Kristen. That's why she does what she does now, because she saw that and went, this isn't okay. Like they just don't know. They're not being taught either. So
totally.
And
I think part of the issue too is like mold is such an elephant in the room and it's such a big issue. It's like, it's that moment of like, when I got my test results, I felt so much relief, but also like panic and anxiety at the same time. It's so much easier to like treat someone for something that doesn't involve them like moving out of their house and getting rid of their belongings and like doing all of those things to get better. It's a lot more intensive.
Yeah, it's very holistic, like you said, right? Like it encompasses every part of your life, and it's not a quick fix,
right?
In any way, shape, or form. Before we jumped on the call, you were telling me about a group that you are working with some other people on, and we want to make sure we give you a second to quickly share about that. And then also we want to make sure you let people know where they can learn more about connecting with you, if they have questions about your story or questions about the services that you offer. And we'll try and post some of the links that we talked about too with this video, because I think I'm excited to find some of those links.
Yeah, I'll definitely share those with you after. Yeah,
please.
Sounds good. Yeah, and so the container that myself and some colleagues are hosting is a 90-day support group for people who are trying to navigate with SIRS, chronic inflammatory response syndrome, mold toxicity, Lyme disease, or other autoimmune issues, which are most likely tied back to mold toxicity and other environmental toxins. And so the support group will just be a container to learn from each other, but also from people that have made it through on the other side. We're using the regenerative health protocol, as well as providing information and support tools for people dealing with mold inspection remediation. So if you want to share some information that could be helpful for clients, they're all over the United States. And so there might be people in Texas that are going to be part of the group, but there's an informational call tonight and then also October 11th. So I believe this will probably be aired after the fact, but I can definitely share the details on that if people want to join in or learn more about that. You can follow my Instagram page at Build Vibrant Health, Mary Cornwell. And then I can also give you my contact information after this.
Yeah, definitely. We'll include that if
Cool.
people have more questions.
Sounds
Yeah,
good.
please share the resources, especially like on the soil and the farming, because that
Yeah,
I think that's just, we talked about it, but that's such a critical piece that people aren't talking about.
it is. And I think there's like, for me at least, and I know a lot of people watching this, it's very much like take binders, take these things to detox, do this, and this. And for me, it helped to an extent, but then it didn't like it wasn't the thing that tipped my body back into balance. So I think sometimes we have to like zoom out and see like if the approach we're using isn't working, like what are the things that we're missing?
Yeah.
And that was a big part of it. So
Well, thank you very much.
yeah, of course.
Glad we finally got this on the books.
Seriously, it's been a long time.